Hello everyone and welcome back to Roshem Joe Paints. As always, my name is Joe and today we are going to be painting the Skorpekh Destroyer Lord in my Sautekh Dynasty scheme. Going to be doing things slightly differently. I'm going to try to keep the video under a half an hour. No promises, but that's what the goal will be. And also in the shorter version, I may not get as many of the carousel type spin around and show you what I've done. So what I might do is take longer views and explain steps in between. I'm also going to be adding more videos explaining the like the muzzle burner video I did recently. I'm going to do things on the hyperphase swords, power swords, etc., etc. So there may not be as much in the video that explains exactly how it does, but if I do have a supplementary video to that, I'll definitely point you to it. So I'll likely put up a picture of it at some point during this this ramble. So if that looks good and you want to invest hopefully what is less time than normal, stick with me and we'll get started after the intro. Real quick, I just wanted to interrupt myself and shout out and say thank you to the 50+ people who have decided to subscribe to my channel. This is something that I'm just planning on doing for a lot of fun here. So anyone who has jumped on and enjoys it as much as I enjoy painting, I appreciate it very much and look forward to putting out more stuff for you to check out. All right, thank you. So here we have the Skorpekh Lord. Today, I'm not going to go over the rules in the video as I had done on the last few, simply because I am trying to actually, and when I say trying, I am actually trying this time, to make a more video that's just focused on here are the steps and here's how we did it, with a little bit of tips and tricks and of course a lot of messing up along the way. But I may at some point make a video, like a tutorial on how to play, and what that will be, you know, going over the rules of specific models, going over the phases, going over tactics and whatnot, and it will be less of a here are the winning tactics and more of a, you know, new player discovering the tactics. We'll see if I make something like that. I talked to my buddies too about trying to rope them in and trying to figure out a way of explaining all that. But that said, let's look at the model here. So the model itself has 3 massive arms, 3 massive legs, and you know, it in general is just a larger version of the destroyers. I was calling this a Skorpekh Destroyer Lord originally. I guess it's just a Skorpekh Lord from the Destroyer cults. So the way that this is assembled is, let's go in reverse here. Take the face off, a la John Travolta, Nicolas Cage. And then I'm going to take this whole thing off of the platform. Three anchor points, which I appreciate because then it makes it sit quite nicely. This spine, similar to, I think it was the blade guard, goes all the way through and connects to the chest piece. So the chest piece right now is press fit in. It has a point here on the belt, essentially. And I had to drill that hole out a little bit because as I was trying to push it in, it was blocking. So I had to shorten this peg and I had to drill that hole out a little bit in order to get the chest pieces to sit flushly. Other than that, it's just you know, these arms press into place really well. You have to watch for this hose needs to match up later on with that little piece right there. So as it gets assembled, or once it's fully assembled, what happens is, go ahead and put that piece back on. This hose, this hose here plugs into the spine, and that, you know, you want it to sit roughly centered. Same thing on this side. You have another piece, and this time it's the hoses here. You can see it's separate now, it's together. But yeah, so these 3 arms. This is, I'm not going to paint this thing assembled, obviously, because I want to be able to paint it separately, or I want to paint as much detail as possible. So that's why I'm going to be painting it separately. But so this will be pretty easy. I'll be able to paint this entire weapon, paint this entire arm and weapon, paint this entire arm and weapon, and then go back and put them all on. Now, like I said, the spinal cord goes through and touches, or and attaches to the chest piece. I would like in the future, if I was painting another one of these, or it was a non-push to fit model, it would be nice to be able to paint this But I don't want to attempt to cut these off and then glue them back into place and hope that they get into the right spot later. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and paint all these pieces separately, and then once all the arms and all that, we'll do an assembly, and then I will look to see, once it's press fit like this, to see if there's any seams that are still seen, and maybe I'll try to fill those later on, but if they're covered up for the most part, I'll just leave them. And then the last piece is up here on these orbs. This piece, as you can see, the shoulder kind of, wow, I cannot hold that piece. The shoulder clamps around that orb, so that'll be something that's done much later. So this will probably just get a Caliban green to start, and then I'll wait until it's assembled, and then I'll do all the highlights on the shoulders. So, but as with every Necron I paint, the first step is going to be to get a little bit of Nuln Oil. Could you paint a model with Nuln Oil?
A few moments later.
I bet you could, but it would take a lot, and it probably wouldn't turn out good. Okay, that'll be a future video, how to paint an entire model with Nuln Oil. So what we're going to do is we're going to do some Chaos Black instead, because that's a much better primer, and then move on from there. Side note, I do use a little bit of the Elmer's Tack and Stick, or Stick and Tack, or whatever it is. Basically, it's a hard putty, but you can use putty or you can use whatever you'd like. I do fill in the gaps like these guys here. That's why they do not appear to be primed, because they aren't. So I just do that just to make sure that the model fits together later. You could also cover all the actual joining parts, but these guys I'm not as concerned as with the pieces that actually press, because when you go to push together, they may, yeah, that extra primer in there is gonna just limit your ability to do that. So with the Chaos Black done though, we are now going to paint Leadbelcher, and rather than doing a dry brush, I am going to go ahead and just paint in all of these areas and take my time with it, make sure I get a nice coat, maybe have to do 2 coats. I can avoid, I mean, I don't need to paint over this area again. Just leave it that prime, because the more paint you do add there, the worse the fit is going to be. And also make sure I'm going around all of these circles. I don't want to fill in any of those, just so that when they press together later, we're still good to go. So this will be for pretty much the entire model. Feel free to be as, you know, just dirty as you want, because we're going to do a couple coats of this, and then we're going to make it even more dirty with some shades later. So just make sure you cover everything. You don't need to paint things like the weapon, and I already know that these shoulders are going to be the Caliban green, so you know, I could just go up to them thusly and not actually paint in them. Same thing with these hoses. The hoses are going to be green, so they don't need to be painted. So if you know where you would like to paint, and you know all the colors that you're planning on putting in the model, well, then you can avoid painting those areas. But for now, this is probably the messiest step. Oh, actually, I would say that the dry brushing that'll be done later is going to be even messier. But in general, you don't need to really worry about too much of this. I am going to paint, even though I don't know if it's seen, but just I'd like to paint in here, just to make sure if it does get seen, it doesn't just, you know, end up being a black. Same thing with like under here. It's probably fine remaining black, but I'm going to go ahead and paint it anyway, just in the off chance you catch it from a side over here. I want it to look like metal and not just like black, even though I'm sure it would look like a shadow. So, all right, do all your silvers in Leadbelcher and then come back. Don't forget, as my daughter has done for me, is to go and find all of these little spider guys, these little mini scarabs. There's, I think, 4 total. No, there's 5 total. There's these 3 that are on this portion of the scenery, I'll say. Then there's one over here. These are really the most important parts of the model. The Skorpekh Lord is pretty cool, but overall we want to make sure that we do a job finding all these guys, because that is key. So there you go. And the 5 of them. And also there's some metal popping out of the woodwork here, and it's not actually wood, it's going to be stone later, but you know what I mean. So get all these pieces of broken metal here, Make sure to bump the camera if you are filming. And there you go. So paint the rest of the model and then we shall move on. I washed over the Leadbelcher with Agrax Earthshade, and now that that is completely dry, I'm going to come in here and dry brush really, really lightly over all those Leadbelcher areas with Runefang steel just to catch the edges best I can. Most of these edges you're seeing in here are not going to be seen, but that's kind of my thing, is I have to paint everything, or at least the most that I can. So we're going to paint all of the Leadbelcher areas with that dry brush of Runefang steel, and then we will move on. So the dry brush of Runefang steel is now complete, and the next step I'm going to do is actually edge highlighting, or just general highlighting with Runefang steel again, but this time more as instead of a dry brush, we're going to be doing things like painting on what I would consider these little like pieces of cylinders, just to make sure these get a nice bright coat, as if they were, if the leg is moving in and out, you'd think that this would be, recently used, versus this piece here, which could be nice and dirty. So anyways, regardless of why I'm painting it, so I'm going to be doing these pieces here, and then we are going to do something specific to the well, I'll get to that in sections, or it's a whole separate step, but ooh, it's a teaser. What's he talking about? Anyways, going to continue doing this stuff. I don't know if there's a whole lot of that around the rest of the model. I don't think there's, the rest of it is just kind of there, if you will. Maybe this piece right here, actually. It's like this little piece, which would, if the arm was flexing back and forth, this one right here, like an actuator or something. I don't know what it's called. It's probably something really simple that I can't remember the name of. But anyways, point is, I'm adding Runefang steel to where I feel like adding it. If there are some edges that you feel didn't get hit, like I always go and clean this one up, because while I dry brushed it, it doesn't really look like it has a whole lot of detail on it. So I like to go and make sure that the tip here is really clean, and maybe the insides of this and the outsides like that, especially since that had a little bit of green on there. I started painting the green, as you can see. So anyways, so there, just to do, wherever you feel like it. I'm not going to do this whole section right here. I'll leave that kind of, this I might clean up, actually, since you would think that that would be rolling around in that spot. So basically look around the model. I'm doing a couple things here and there, but I'm sure there's a couple more. But look for the things that you can think they may have had some sort of movement recently, and those ones are the ones that I am making look a little shinier than normal. So there you go, and then we'll move on to another step. So something I am going to do that is going to be kind of unique to the Skorpekh Lord that did not happen on the Destroyers, because this guy has a was it the Flensing Claw or whatever? So what I'm going to do is, the top part I'm going to leave nice and dirty, but this bottom portion, you see there's a little bit of shade that settled in there, and even with the dry brush you can see the nice defined line right there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to paint Ironbreaker, which is Leadbelcher, I think is the darkest silver metallic, and then you have Ironbreaker. I'm sure there's more. Currently what I have is Leadbelcher, Ironbreaker, and Runefang steel. So we're going to go and layer some Ironbreaker just in this bottom portion, and the idea is we're going to try to make it look a little bit sharper, a little bit nastier, essentially. And then we will come back once that's dry, and we will give it a same thing. Like, we're going to come back here and reinforce the. See, that's why I put those little notes there, so I can remind myself, oh, if I can see that note, then I am doing it wrong. But we're going to come in here and reinforce the edges again once with the an actual edge highlight, not another dry brush, but with the Runefang steel again. So I'm going to come in here, like I said, just clean these up, make them look nice and sharp and nasty. I did the thumb already. You can see this nice edge highlight with Runefang steel. And down here, again, you have the, let me see if I can get it to cooperate. But basically, you just want it to look kind of just bad. So the other thing we're going to do is I'll add a little bit of edge highlighting to the what would be the, I don't know, the top of the hand here in this area, but I'm also going to just give a little bit of Ironbreaker on these because they would be constantly used. This is the same thing with the Runefang steel, but I want to be able to highlight these as well if need be. And I'm also going to come back and use that Ironbreaker on my thumb, on just the outer ball joints or whatever these would be called. So just to give it a little bit of, just to break up the overall colors, just because I want to, because that's what painting's all about. You do what you think you looks good. You do what you think you looks good. Painting is not about proper grammar. Don't let anyone tell you different. So regardless, let me go through here and finish up with my Ironbreaker and my highlights of Runefang steel. And at that point, the silver metallics will be done. With all of the silver now completed, I'm going to go ahead and begin working on the Caliban green. Now the portions that are going to be Caliban green are things like the shoulder pads. Back here, they're going to get a nice coat, multiple coats to make sure that all this black gets covered up. We're also going to be going over things like the orbs, and I'm going to do these, but like I said, I think in the intro, I'm going to come back and finish these up later, but we can go ahead and just show you. You can go ahead and do them now. I think there's a total of 6. There are the ones on the legs, the ones on the shoulders, and then I believe I've already done these guys, but then like the one on his belt, as well as his arms, etc. Also, you'll note the hoses in the chest there. And also, so let me do the leg quickly. And the way that I do the legs, I'll do in the same way I did the other destroyers, is that this larger front half will get a nice coat of Caliban green. But I'm going to stop it right about there, about halfway. And that I'm going to leave as battle damage goes. But so what this is going to do is just, it'll give me a little bit of color, but it'll also it won't, in my eyes, it looks better to be split up like that than it does to have a whole lot of green, especially because it's going to be a lot of black and a lot of green up in the weapon area. But so what I will do, the whole knee pad here, or whatever I called this last time, I'm going to call it a knee pad, but it's more like a, I don't know, knee pad. So I'm going to do that whole thing. Make sure you don't, or at least attempt to not hit any of the silver that you've already done. This is going to get a wash or a shade of Agrex Earthshade, not Agrex Earthshade. This one's going to get Null Oil to darken it down even more. And then we'll do a little bit, a couple of steps on top. But, you know, you're going to need, oh, that was still in there. You're going to need a couple of steps or a couple of coats of this, especially if you're using a tiny little brush like this. You can use a thicker brush, but at this point I already started, so I'm going to keep going with it. But let me show you the last areas that are going to get hit, and that is, well, actually, things like the hoses on this. So the only thing on this one is going to be these 2 little hoses, and I'm going to do that just because this is like a hose that's going to the back of his head. So that will get painted. You can do that in black too. It's kind of a smaller detail that you may not even see later, but finish that later as well. But something I'm going to try on this guy, for as much as I hate highlighting in black, is you see these recesses. So there's this hose, and again, try not to hit the silver best you can, so that you don't have to do it over again later. But so I'm just going to be doing these hoses, and I'm going to be doing the same thing as I had done with my what was that called? The Canoptic Reanimator, where he's got like, you know, 30 something hoses or whatever it ended up being. But basically, like, all of these are going to be green, but they're going to get a full, you know, it'll be, what do you call it? Caliban green, Warpstone glow, blah, 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 blah. I'll show you later as we go through those steps. So those are going to be green, but this other hose that's next to it, I was thinking about just having it like be metal and doing it easy, but you know what? I might as well make it difficult on myself because it is a character after all. And basically doing this in every single indent that he's got, doing a little bit of this Caliban green, which will then be all the way up to probably Moot green. But basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to do all of the Caliban green for now, since we're doing it. And then once we go into the step with Abaddon black, I'll end up putting black over it. We'll come back with Warpstone glow. And then I'm going to try to dry brush on just ever so lightly. I'm going to attempt to just scrape the tops with a little bit of Dawnstone so that you can see that there's an individual piece to all of these. And then a little dab of Moot green in the middle. That's the attempt. If it doesn't turn out that way, then I will simply paint over the thing in silver and shade and call it a day. Also, these parts within the gun here, wow, that was lucky as my control was not there at all. These parts within the gun and the tubes in here. And finally, the last portion, we will just try and put a little bit of a dot in here. You can always clean this up. Actually, this one doesn't matter because this canister is going to be painted black, but the metal that's above and below is going to remain silver, so just be careful at that point. So let's do all of this Caliban green and then shade just the armor pieces. So that is just the shoulders and the legs. And that's it, I think. Oh, I also obviously did the hyperphase Reaper Majig. Did that in green too. But I'm only going to be doing basically the armor pieces are going to be painted in, are covered in Nuln Oil. The rest of it is going to get lighter shades later on, so we're not going to bother doing any shading on that. So that was hopefully the longest segment, and after that, it'll be more of just all right, now apply Warpstone Glow, now apply Moot Green. So something along those lines. We'll see how it goes. All right, so this is the first application of Warpstone Glow that we're going to do, and I say first because the way that I want to do this is I'm going to do a dry brush just to lighten up the legs and all of the armor pieces with Warpstone Glow, and then we will cover and actually do an actual edge highlight with Moot Green. But after that, then we're going to come back once again, once all the armor is completed, and we are going to do a layer on all of the orbs and weapons and whatnot with that same Warpstone Glow. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to be able to say, okay, hey, armor's complete. So we're going to go through and we're going to do our dry brush of Warpstone Glow. You'll be hitting the edges just because that's what you do. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to almost lighten the color slightly without just painting Warpstone Glow directly over the entire thing. So that's why it's a dry brush. Just make sure we're getting a good amount of coverage. Now, something I did not show, so like you can see, based on the two legs, one is slightly lighter than the other, but it still has some of the darker, like in the recesses, you still have the dark spots. So I did the hand as well, which I did not show in one of the, still not showing now, one of the previous steps. So here is the flensing claw. So what you can see, and you can see the dark is still showing through a little bit, but for the most part, it has been brightened up. And then we will come back with our edge highlights and make them even stronger later on. So for now, edge highlighting, no. We're going to come back and do that. Am I even listening to myself? For now, dry brushing. And like I said, just try and catch any of these panels just to brighten them up a little bit. You know, but your preference, you can add as much or as little as you want, but that's going to be for shoulder pads, for these legs, and the arm piece. So our Warpstone Glow is done. Now we are going to do a final highlight on the armor pieces with Moot Green. Now the way that I'm doing this is the way that I've done all the other highlights before, is getting a little bit of thin down color on your paintbrush and just running it down the edges of each of the armor pieces. Try to avoid going into, like I just did right there. Try to avoid going into any of the, did I? Man, if I did, it was super thin. That's why thin down paints sometimes help. But try to avoid going into any of your actual recesses, so you don't have to clean them out. Something I've been doing a lot that I've seen in my videos that I figured I might as well point out is I use my pinky and I push up against the other piece. So like now they're kind of one piece and they move together, just as a brace instead of trying to hover them together. But You got to hold it however feels comfortable, obviously. But in general, a little bit of thin down line going down all of the pieces, and then I will also do all of the battle damage or time-worn damage or whatever kind of damage this is. Really, really super light if you can, just something like this, a little bit here, just to have it pop out a little bit, so on both sides, so like that. And when this dries, it will dry slightly darker than it looks right now, if I remember correctly, so you don't have to look like it looking too crazy neon. But the dry brush with the Warpstone glow was one of the other reasons that we did that. One of the other reasons we did the Warpstone glow dry brush in the previous step was so it wouldn't be such a stark difference between a Nuln oil over Caliban green and Moot green. So now that the green portion of the armor is done, I'm going to sidestep over to the black portions. And I hadn't done these on the destroyers, but I'm going to go ahead and do them right now just because the three little, again, like piston casings or whatever those are, there, I already finished all of the black on the arm with the hyperphase Reaper or whatever this was called. And then I put a little bit of black into the, I'm gonna end up keeping the background of the icon and the lettering over here black. The outside's gonna be gold, and then the inside's gonna be either gold or something, I don't know, but I want the background to be black. So I did that, and then I threw it at the other guy. So now, this one here, the only part of black that I got on here is around this hose. And it's gonna be kind of a pain, but it looks pretty good. I already tested a little bit on the other arm. So there's going to be a lighter green in all the little portions here, but instead of just making this pure silver, adding a little bit of wash and then dry brushing over the top, I went ahead and I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm going to make it harder on myself. And so far I'm liking the results. So with that, let's go over to the gun and let me show you real quick what it looks like so far. And like I said, I think it looks pretty good, just showing through. But let's get the gun casing painted. So this is going to be anywhere where you see kind of like battle damage. So it's like this piece here, leave the center silver. This cross piece will come across this. And then again, I'm going to leave that in silver just because I feel like I should have done these in silver, but it's not really like a stabbing weapon. He's already got a couple other stabbing weapons, so I think it's just more or less part of the decoration on the gun. But this whole top over to the other side, etc., etc. So that's going to be the majority. And then I'm not going to touch again anything in here. I'm going to attempt to not hit anything while I paint the inside here, like that. And then again, come down the other side and this side, something along those lines. Maybe this guy here. And then on the canister here, since I said earlier I was going to paint it so I could be messy, not the end caps, but not the outside and the inside, but the middle, essentially. So that would be thing looking like this. And just be careful because we're going to come back and do some greens later in here, but try not to hit the silvers for the most part. And if you can avoid hitting the green, well, avoid hitting the green. So, alrighty, and there you go. So something like that, and we'll finish this one out. We'll go around the hose here, and that's just like, you know, again, watch out for the silver detail, watch out for the hose detail itself. But if you hit that, that's fine. You can clean up with some Caliban because we haven't painted it anything else yet. So, just going to go over and do all of this. And then once it is done, we will move on. So I'm going to use this piece to illustrate the two methods that I'm going to use to apply my favorite paint, Eshin Gray. I actually am getting a little bit more accustomed to how it looks, but overall it's still, I'm going to use maybe a little bit of Dawnstone just to make it a little bit nicer. So as usual, edge highlighting all of the Go Figure edges. And this is done to all the black components that are on the weapons typically, and then the couple of, like, again, like the piston casings or whatever I call them in an earlier section. Basically, if it's black, go ahead and highlight with Eshin gray. You know, that Abaddon black down to a little bit of Eshin gray, and then maybe some, like I said, maybe we'll do some Dawnstone. So we're going to do this. The second portion, though, is also on this piece, so I don't have to go far, which is nice. And we're going to do a dry brush on all these hoses that I painted. And dry brushing is simple, yet messy, so try and not hit any of the silver. Let's get a good angle. And just pulling it across to try and get all of those ridges so that they stand out a little bit more. And we'll go all of these on both arms, so just so it stands out a little bit more, and then when we put that green in there, it'll look great. So I already did this side a little bit as a test earlier, that's why some of it's already green, and you can see, yeah, it looks pretty good. So just gotta finish that part off right there, and for fun I will go over it again just to make sure, but it's already a good gray. Now I'm wondering if I should, so I want to almost make this easier on myself and do a dry brush here. I don't know, what do you think? I don't know. Maybe I'll do it like the greens, where I do a dry brush and then I'll come back and do a Dawnstone. I don't know, I'll figure it out. But in general, you want to edge highlight your black, and you want to, however you want to do that, whether it's dry brushing, whether it's painting on individual lines, but Eshin gray all over the black. I ended up sticking up with the dry brushing because it didn't bother me too much. So, and it was a lot quicker. So, and I think the time that it takes to paint on the Eshin gray is what bothers me most. But now we are going to go finish up the black armor and pieces in general with some dry brushing of Dawnstone. Now, doing it extremely dry to just hit the very sharpest edges, just like that, to try and get them to stick out a little bit more. But I'm not pressing down very hard at all. I'm just, you know, you're like doing like this, like, here, let's just, oh, you can't see what my finger's doing. Let's do this so that it's a wider angle. Basically, it's like, you know, holding it way over here. This is not an actual dry brushing method, but I just want to show how light I'm actually making this paint go on. Of course, I lose a little bit of control, so now I got to clean up areas. Oh, there's never any winning. So I'll also do just mainly the, you know, some of these edges, some of the front. I'm not going to go over and do an extreme, again, a hard, I just want it, I'm not going to do an extremely hard dry brush as I was just showing you. I'm going to go and do a very light dry brushing because I don't want, you know, too much on here, but I do want to pop these hard edges out a bit more. So this will be for this weapon, obviously, and then we will go and do the hose that is on the flensing claw, I think is what it's called, as well as the gray or black that is on the Reaper. So then once you're done with this, we are done with the blacks on the model, and we can move on to some golds. The next step, now that the black is completed, is going to be adding some Retributor armor to the areas that I want to be gold. Now on this piece, I'm only going to be painting, on camera at least, this, I honestly don't know what this is called. I'm going with tabard, because, like, you know, aren't tabards, don't they hang down? But these metal links down here will be painted in gold, and the spine gets painted in gold, kind of like the rest of the destroyers were done. And because I added that little bit of flair to my destroyers in the form of the little white stripe down the front to almost make them look kind of like an immortal, I decided I would do that with this guy as well. And this is going to need a second coat of Retributor armor, but let me show you in 1 second here. So I'm just going to go around the orb as well, and if I hit the orb, it's not a problem because I have to repaint the what is it, Warpstone glow and all that fun stuff. So that'll come up in the next section when I start to do all of the non-armor green portions. But so anyways, so that's going to be there. So there you go. Up at the top here, kind of like a, wow, there's a lot of mouth noises, sorry about that. But basically, I filled in the black here, and then I came back and just did a side of my brush across the very top portion of all these letterings to make them shine and show nicely. So let me show you what I have for the, what do you call that thing? Spine? There you go. Spine again. So spine obviously has a lot of gold on it. We'll paint that up. You know, we will continue to increase that. But I made the face gold because I thought that would be kind of fun. Now let me reach over here real quickly and grab my destroyer. So if you hadn't seen the Skorpekh destroyer yet, so again, he's got a spine in gold. No extra flare on him, but I did the face almost like he's got a white mask on it, and I liked how that looked, and I wanted to do the same thing for the Lord, except the Lord is supposedly like royalty, just insanity as well. So I did the same thing here. So he's going to have a gold face, and I'm still going to do the same idea where I'm going to come in here with a darker color to really define in between where the lines are. And because I'm going to make this gold as well as the this Retributor armor, I'm going to do that in Agrax Earthshade. I want it to be a duller gold. So that'll be for the spinal cord, these two pieces that are going straight up, and this one going down. But I think I will actually just end up using a Retributor armor, which gives it a more like a warm gold feel on the front here, although I realistically don't need to do anything except for maybe in the shade. Whatever, we'll go over it anyway. And same thing on the face. So I want the face to be a little more standout-ish, just to make it look, you know, a little bit shinier, whereas the other ones are gonna get dulled down. Now, having said that, I might change my mind after I get to see what it looks like dry, and then go over it with some Agrax Earthshade as well. But first step, let me get my second coat of Retributor armor on here, and then we'll get shading the ones that I know for a fact are going to be Agrax. So I've gone through and added a little bit of Liberator Gold as an edge highlight around the head. I'll come back later and do the line of black on the silver to define that a little bit better. And then I've been doing a little bit of dry brushing again, because it's becoming my favorite thing every once in a while. And it is just on the edges here of the gold on the spine. And I've also completed what I call the tabard, but I don't know what it's actually called. And we'll come back here and we'll do, what do you call it? We'll do Runefang steel just on the very tips. But I just wanted to brighten that back up. I dulled it down and I want to brighten it back up. But while we're at it, we might as well do this portion up here. And we'll be hitting just I have too much paint on my brush. A dry brush, not a wet brush. Is it dry yet? Is it dry yet? Is it dry yet? There we go. Now we're where we wanted it to be. Now it's just hitting the edges. All right, so there you go. Make sure you pay attention when you're painting. Pro tip. But so we're gonna come through here, and again, this upper section was in Reikland Flesh Shade, so it should be a little bit darker, more of a bronzy gold, while the lower portion, or just the decorative portion and the head, were done with Reikland Flesh Shade. So that's this here. I'm just gonna come in here very, very gently and just across the front, see if I can get a little bit of this Liberator Gold to settle. Move the head away so I don't crush it accidentally somehow. Just like this, and there we go. So finishing up the dry brush on this, I'm going to add a little bit of edge highlighting. If you can add, you can do this as just an edge highlight with Liberator Gold. If you got a really steady hand. But there's a lot of detail here, and I feel like the dry brush is actually the way to go because it's picking it up pretty well. So there you go. And I don't know if you can tell, but except for the fact that I put too much Liberator Gold down here when I was dry brushing, the two colors are slightly different, but just enough that, you know, he'll look a little fancier. So anyways, let me go back. I'm going to show you the Runefang steel next. All right, now we're going to come in here with the Runefang steel, but instead of going the entire way, I'm just going to do a very thin line closer to the top. I don't even know if you saw that, but, you know, it's there. On the posts here around the top, just to add a little bit of extra shine, I'm not going to do, maybe I will, just the top portion of that weathering or the broken piece around the outsides here. So basically just to give the top of this as well as the top of the spine a little bit extra shine to it and make it look that much fancier. I did that on the destroyers as well, and I figure why not do it here. Same thing with this, maybe just the very outer edges. Just come in here, and if you don't hit every single one of them, that's fine. You know, I just want it to be a little shinier near the outsides, the very hard edges. So start from the bottom again. So that seems to be working out pretty well. So let's move on to things like the Warpstone glow. Now this is going to go on, this will be an actual, hopefully, a decent glowing effect on most of the pieces that I'm about to apply it to. And that is going to be for things like these tubes within the gun, these hoses, these guys here, obviously, the very, very tiny and thin, get a better point on the brush, just in there in the canister, and there we go. And then of course I said I was going to do every single one of these, so we're going to put a little bit of Warpstone glow in every single spot here. I'll go back and finish all these later because it takes a really steady hand of paying attention, but we're also going to go and cover this entire hose as well as any of the other hoses we find along this model with this color. So get maybe 2 base coats just to make sure, or 2 layers, because it's a layer paint. We're not actually doing a base coat over primer, we're doing a layer over what was previously a base coat of Caliban green. But regardless, paint that guy in. We're going to do the orbs as well. Let's see if I have one that is, I was doing most of these earlier. So I think I did this one. This is probably the 2nd or 3rd coat just to make sure we got a nice base of Warpstone glow, and that's all it is it's just getting some paint, cover up any Caliban green you see. So, along with all of the orbs and hoses that we've done in Warpstone glow, we are now going to do the hyperphase sword section of this. The first thing I like to do is define where I want the actual green to be, and in this case I'm going to pick this circle kind of as like a center for where it starts and ends, and so I'm going to paint the Warpstone glow lightly. This is thinned down, and we will be doing lots of transitions back and forth. I will also have a video that explains, probably in more detail, or at least shows a little bit more of me doing this between the colors that I use. So I'm going to be going in this direction on the top. Then we will do the same thing on the opposite side again, kind of picking this circle here as where we're going to end that transition, or at least, you know, start, end, wherever you want to, 6 to 1, half dozen to another. But something along those lines, painting this way with the Warpstone glow, all the way up to the edge. Don't forget the tops here as well. You're going to paint all the way like that towards the transition front as well. And then on the bottom side, we're going to pick the same thing. So we can start here at the center because we know the center is going to be bright. And we're going to go and slowly move towards that circle once again. And we will pick everything up in between and maybe go a little bit past the circle, a little bit past the circle, a little bit past the circle. So you can see like they're overlapping is at that circle piece. So the circle itself is going to be green. So I'll go ahead and paint that. Now that the Warpstone glow is dry, what we're going to do is come in with a nice thin coat of Moot green and add it to probably mostly this center portion here. And then I'll try to hug the silver like this, like just on the inside, because I want the outside to remain, or the parts that closer to the end of the canister, that is, to remain on the cork. There we go. But I'm still going to go over the top here. So it's just going to be like the whole center of this. And then what I will do is get an even thinner coat of that Warpstone and then kind of pull towards the center and maybe just hope that the the outside fades out a little bit and is not as strong of a solid line. What we can do to fix that line if we wanted to is later on we'll come in with some Warpstone glow and do the same deal where we have a nice thin line and we just kind of dab it along where the two meet to try and create a smoother line. So he's holding this up, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to do right here on the bend, I'm also going to do some thin down Moot green, probably from about, this is completely eyeballing it, just personal preference, right about there to right about there, something like that. And I'm going to go up a little further, out a little further, over the top of the lines, over the bottom of the lines, or the hoses. And what I will do is, now that I've kind of defined where I feel like it should be, so I'm going to go grab some thin down, no paint this time, and just bring some water back in here, push it down a little bit, push it back down towards the center. And now some thin down, oops, that was Caliban green. Thin down Warpstone glow. And to clean up this line, so I'll start way up here where it was already still dry and just push towards where I want that Moot green to mainly be. And with this, I will be able to create more of a smooth transition from the Warpstone glow into the Moot green on this hose. So, along with the rest of the Moot green, we're going to add some Moot green to the hyperphase sword, and that is, so we have about, from about here to here. So this time we're just going to pick up closer to the end, probably about half, let's say. And we're going to do that again, thin down with whatever you would like to use to thin it down, and we're going to cover just this half and blend in or blend back in. We got some Moot green now, and we will go in, and I like to make little circular patterns. I don't know if that helps or not, but that's what I like to do. But I'm pulling from the Moot green into the Warpstone glow, trying to create a nice little transition here. Moot green and is now completed, so what we are going to do is we are going to add a little bit of Dorn yellow. Dorn yellow in a very, very thin down form to the hoses as just a thin little line near what would be effectively the center. And just like with all of the other portions of the green, if any of this is more than you'd like to see, as far as like maybe too strong or just too much of it, go ahead and just grab some Moot green and go back and cover that right back up. So I can tell that I'm going to have to fix that a little bit, but you get an idea. That's where it's going to be as far as the placement goes. We'll do next on the orb, and the orbs are going to be maybe about 50%. I like to give a good amount, but overall it's not going to be a whole lot. Gonna water this Dorn yellow. I thought they had this at the right consistency, but I'm gonna water it down a little bit more. And I'm gonna zoom in a little bit more. So right now it's just a really, really hard circle. So I'm gonna go ahead and see if I can't thin this out around the edges of that circle. And then what I will do is I will come back with a little bit of Moot green in a second here. So like that. Let's get some Moot green, thin down as well. There we go. And then just kind of go around the outside of that Dorn yellow we just put on there, because we want to get a nice smooth transition, similar to what we'll be doing for the hyperphase and all that fun stuff. So we'll show you a little bit of the sword, but realistically that's what's going to have been done there for orbs, hoses. What else we got on here? The gun portion, the little canisters, all that fun stuff. So eyes too. Let me show you actually this I'm pretty happy with. So the destroyer head was the white. Sorry. Was the white mask. Now I've got the gold mask, and I think I'm done with this. I'm kind of happy with how it looks, the extra little scratches, and again, it just looks like a nice little gold covering to it. So anyways, let me go grab the sword. We'll do a little bit of that, and then we'll do a little bit of basing. We'll do a little bit of finishing up. All right, the last step for our sword is going to be 2 steps, technically. And what we're going to do is we're going to take some really, really thin down Dorn yellow, and we're going to come out here on the very, very edge of where you have put the Moot green. And we're going to blend this in just like we've been blending everything else in. And what this will do is give a nice bright highlight to all of the Moot green. There we go. Now it's super watery and super thin down. That's exactly what we were looking for, because we're going to go over, probably do about 60 or 70 coats. Not really, but you know what I mean. We're just trying to make this a nice smooth gradient, so if we take a lot longer to do it, so be it. Now, the second part of the Dorn yellow on the sword is all of the edges are going to get an edge highlight of Dorn yellow. So that is going to be everything from over here all the way down to this side. And what I like to consider this is like a game shark in my mind, because once you start putting this edge highlight on, then these swords really start to look and feel the right way. So we're going to do that. And final step of the hyperphase sword, once all of the obviously blending is done, is I've got a little bit of Abaddon black, and I'm going to come in here and I'm going to trace the lines that are in between that currently have a little bit of the green and will likely have some Dorn yellow. And I just want to basically go in here and just make them a nice clean black, and then, you know, obviously I'll go back again and clean up with Dorn yellow if I run over any of that. But really, really thin. Ooh, that is a terrible brush edge. That's better. Zoom in. So this is just to make the shapes that are on the sword stand out a little bit better, and then contrast with that Dorn yellow really, really nicely. So, all right, there we go. So go through again, lots and lots of thin little coats. That's too much paint. Lots and lots of thin little coats here. If you got to go back with a little bit of the Moot green, do so. And of course, you know, this is really, you're going to be going back and forth, well, or at least I'm going to be going back and forth with like Moot green here, you know, to try and blend it in. And then if I go over the Warpstone glow, I might, you know, blend in again, Warpstone glow, make sure that edge is nice and soft. But it's just a lot of, you know, it's a lot of back and forth, but realistically, it's a lot of just paying attention to what your paints are looking like, and if you're liking how that gradient is going, and then just fixing it if you feel like you need to, fix it. So there you go. So we've come once again to the part of the episode where I get to say, and there it is, the completed Skorpekh Lord, ready to go out on the battlefield and do as much damage with as little regard to life as possible. I don't say that every video, but it seems applicable here. This guy was, as always, a lot of fun to paint. I do think that I would have enjoyed maybe one more arm or one less arm with the ranged weapon mounted on his shoulder or something like that, kind of like the Predator. Just seems like the right-hand side of his body is really crowded, and the left should either be more crowded or maybe the right should be a little less crowded. Who knows? Overall, though, a lot of fun to paint, a lot of details. He pretty much grabs just about something from every model in the Necron range. He's got the orbs, he's got the hyperphase sword, he's got the gun that has the Tesla carbine kind of feel to it, or the Gauss Reaper, Gauss Flare, whatever it is. Tesla carbine, I don't remember what that is. Oh, that's a destroyer. Anyways, he's got a lot of things going for him. Immortal, not the destroyer, but he's got a lot of things going for him regardless. So it does make him kind of, you know, a real challenge to paint, and I had a lot of fun doing it. If you made it this far into the video, thanks again, because I do know that I did not reach that 30-minute, or I did not stop at that 30-minute mark that I intended to, but, you know, I do feel I cut down on the rambliness, maybe not so much in the outro here that you know, that's going to be a little bit extra ramble, but the painting's done at this point. So if you liked it, like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff that goes along with YouTube. Follow me on socials. I try to stay a little more active on Instagram because it seems like a an easy and fun place to get a little bit of exposure. Overall, though, I do appreciate everyone who comes and watches. So share it with anyone you think might enjoy it, and if nothing else, hopefully see you on the next one. Once again, we come to the end of the episode where I get to stay,